3 days after I showed up at my son's front doors, with nothing but a torn jacket and a story I prayed they'd never see through, my attorney walked into my youngest son's kitchen with a briefcase, 2 witnesses, and a cashier's check for $47 million. My oldest gave me $100 through a gap in his front door and told me to find a shelter. My middle son counted out $150 in cash like he was settling a tab and reminded me there were resources available. My youngest, a man who rebuilds wrecked cars for a living, sat across from me at his kitchen table while his pregnant wife quietly made plans to sell the truck he needs to keep his shop running so I'd have enough money to eat. I want you to sit with that for a moment before I tell you the rest. Before we continue, take a second and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I read more of those than you'd probably guess. And just so we're clear, parts of what you're about to hear have been shaped for storytelling purposes. Some names and details are changed, but everything that matters, the love and the absence of it, the choices people make when they think nobody's watching, that part is completely real. My name is Silas. I'm 64 years old. I built a regional commercial construction company from a second-hand pickup truck and a $12,000 line of credit I took out in 1987. By the time I sold Hartwell Construction to a private equity firm 3 years ago, it was worth just over $47 million net. I live alone in a 4-bedroom house in Marietta, Georgia. I have a workshop in the back where I build furniture I'll never sell. And most evenings I eat dinner by myself in a kitchen that still has my wife's handwriting on the whiteboard by the refrigerator, where she used to leave grocery lists. May died 7 years ago. Ovarian cancer. 11 months from diagnosis to the last breath she took with my hand in hers. She was the kind of woman who made every room feel like it had better light in it. After she was gone, the house didn't get darker exactly. It just got quieter in a way that never quite went away. I have 3 sons. Adrian is the oldest, 40 years old, sharp-dressed, lives in a house in Buckhead that has a circular driveway and a wine cellar. He started his real estate development company with $400,000 I gave him when he was 29. He's done well with it, I'll give him that. But somewhere between the capital I fronted him and the success he built with it, he stopped calling just to talk. Every conversation eventually circled back to business. Every visit had an agenda. Colin is the middle son. 37, works in financial services in Chicago. I paid for his MBA at Wharton, $220,000, and gave him another $100,000 to seed his first investment fund. He doubled it in 18 months, which made him feel like he'd done it himself. He has the particular confidence of a man who has never quite connected what he has with where it came from. Jude is the youngest, 33. He runs a one-bay auto body and collision repair shop in Dalton, a small city in northwest Georgia. When he told me in his junior year of high school that he wanted to go to trade school instead of college, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't disappointed. I enrolled him in a 2-year automotive technology program, bought him his first set of professional tools, helped him put down the deposit on his shop lease. $28,000 total. Less than I spent on Colin's first semester at Wharton. I'm ashamed to say I noticed the difference at the time, and that I drew a private conclusion from it about who Jude would become. I've spent 7 years being wrong about that. Jude is married to Wren. She's 31, works part-time at a daycare center in town, and has the kind of stillness about her that you only find in people who are genuinely comfortable with who they are. They rent a small house on a dead-end street outside of Dalton. 2 bedrooms, a backyard with a vegetable garden that doesn't always cooperate, and a carport where Jude parks the F-250 he uses to haul parts and tow vehicles when jobs require it. The night everything started, I was sitting on my back porch, drinking coffee, and watching the last of the light go out of the sky over the tree line. My phone buzzed on the armrest. It was Adrian. "Hey Dad, listen. I need to run something by you. I've got a development deal in Dunwoody mixed use. The financing is solid, but I'm short on the equity side. I need $250,000 to close the gap or the partnership dissolves." Not hello, not how are you, just the number. I asked him to come for dinner and talk it through in person. "My schedule is brutal right now," he said. "Can you just wire it to the title company? I'll send you the details." I told him I'd think about it. He said, okay, but I could hear in his voice that he'd already moved on to his next call. 40 minutes later, Colin. Dad. Good timing. There's a private equity opportunity I've been tracking. Solid fundamentals. But I need to commit by Friday. It's $180,000. This is the kind of thing that doesn't come back around. I asked about Thanksgiving. He'd mentioned last year that he wanted to come down. Yeah, I'll try, he said. But this thing has a hard deadline. Can you tell me yes or no on the capital? I told him I'd think about it. He said sure, and we hung up in the way you hang up with someone you're scheduling, not loving. I sat there in the dark for a while after that second call. Not angry, that came later. What I felt first was just tired. The particular tiredness of realizing something you'd been not looking at for a very long time. Then my phone buzzed again. Jude. Hey Dad, sorry to call late. You up? I'm up. Just wanted to check in. You eating all right? It's getting cold down there, isn't it? You been wearing your coat when you go out in the mornings? I actually laughed. Out loud by myself on my dark back porch, I laughed. I'm wearing my coat, I said. We talked for 30 minutes. About his shop. About a 1968 Camaro restoration he'd been working on for a customer, a retired school principal from Ringgold who'd owned the car since 1972 and wanted it drivable again before he turned 80. About Ren. About nothing important at all. When I set the phone down, I sat very still. And then I made a decision that I'm still not sure was entirely the right one. Even now, even knowing how it turned out. I called my old attorney, Baxter. We'd worked together for 22 years. Through the sale of the company, through May's estate, through things I don't need to go into here. Baxter, I said, I need your help with something unusual. He was quiet for a moment. Define unusual. I want to disappear for 3 days, I said. Not really disappear. I want to show up at my son's homes with nothing. No wallet, no phone, nothing they'd recognize as mine. I need to see who I am to them when I have nothing to offer. There was a long pause on the other end. Silas, he said carefully, you're 64 years old. I know how old I am. He argued with me for 20 minutes. I let him argue. Then I told him what I needed, which was a security detail that would keep their distance, a burner phone, and his word that if anything went genuinely wrong, he'd have someone there within the hour. He agreed. He always did eventually. That night I went through my closet and pulled out the worst things I owned. A pair of canvas work pants from 15 years ago, stiff and pale from too many washes. A gray Henley with a fraying collar. An old Carhartt jacket from my job site days, cracked at the elbows. I left my wallet, my phone, and my watch on the kitchen counter and folded $200 in small bills into the jacket's breast pocket. I didn't shower. I hadn't shaved in 4 days already. I looked in the bathroom mirror before I left. I barely recognized myself, not because I looked so different. I was still there somewhere, same eyes, same jaw. But the man looking back seemed frightened in a way that I realized, with some difficulty, was not entirely an act. I locked the house and walked. The first night I spent at a Greyhound terminal, sitting on a plastic seat bolted to the floor, watching people come and go, trying not to think about my back, which informed me by 2 in the morning that 64-year-old spines were not designed for this. Somewhere around midnight, a man sat down next to me, late 60s, maybe 70, wearing a VFW cap over gray hair that needed cutting. He had a paper bag on his lap and was eating crackers from it slowly, the way you eat when you're making something last. His name was Wes. He'd been sleeping rough for almost 2 years. Before that, he'd owned a welding supply business in Smyrna that went under when a big box competitor opened 3 miles away. After the business went, the house followed, then his marriage, and then his daughter stopped calling. Not all at once. Just a call missed here, a text not returned there, until one day he realized he was always the one reaching out, and she was always the one not quite answering. She didn't cut me off, he said, with a kind of careful fairness I found remarkable. She just stopped reaching back. There's a difference, I think. One's a door slamming. The other's a door that just drifts shut. He offered me crackers. I took 3. We sat together for an hour. He told me about Vietnam, about the welding business, about the particular silence of a phone that doesn't ring anymore, I didn't tell him the truth about who I was. I'm not proud of that, even now. When I got up to leave, Wes looked at me and said, "You've got people, don't you? I can tell." I didn't answer. "Go to them," he said. "Whatever it is, go to them." I thought about him the whole bus ride to Atlanta. Adrian's house in Buckhead sits behind an iron gate with a keypad and a camera mounted on a stone column. I stood at the intercom in my cracked jacket and pressed the button. "Who is it?" His voice flat and efficient. "It's your father." Silence then. "That's not funny." "Adrian, it's me." The gate buzzed open slowly as if it was doing me a personal favor. He met me in the driveway. He had a glass of bourbon in his hand, which meant he'd been home a while. And he looked at me the way you look at something that has appeared in the wrong place at the wrong time. His face ran through 4 expressions in 2 seconds before landing on something controlled. "What happened to you?" I told him the story I'd prepared. Lost the business, a lawsuit, a bad deal, timing that couldn't be worse. Lost the house, I needed help. Just a place to sleep, something to eat. He shifted his weight. He glanced back toward the house, where I could see lights and hear music. "I have clients here," he said. "Business dinner. We've been planning this for 3 weeks. Adrian." "Dad," he said it quietly, but there was a wall behind the word. "I can't do this tonight. Whatever's going on, there are resources, there are programs for this kind of thing." He went inside. He came back 2 minutes later with cash folded in half and pressed it into my hand without quite meeting my eyes. $100. "Get yourself a room somewhere," he said. "Get some sleep. We can figure out the rest when things settle down." The door closed. The deadbolt clicked into place. I heard the secondary lock engage after that, a small deliberate sound like a period at the end of a sentence. I stood in his driveway for a moment, holding the $100, looking at the lights in his windows. Then I walked back out through the iron gate. I took the overnight bus to Chicago. Collins Building is all glass and steel in River North, the kind of building where you need a fob to get past the lobby. I called up from the intercom, and he buzzed me through, and was waiting in the hall when the elevator opened. He was in a dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, laptop open on the kitchen island behind him. He looked at me the way engineers look at broken equipment, assessing the problem, calculating the fix. "I've got a client call at 8, he said before I'd even spoken. "I need you to understand that going in." I told him the same story. He listened with his hands in his pockets, nodding occasionally, his eyes moving to the laptop screen and back. He went to the bedroom. He came back with cash, counted out in crisp 20s, and handed it to me with the clinical efficiency of someone settling an invoice. $150. "There's a mission on Canal Street," he said. "Pacific Garden. They take walk-ins. They're good people. It's not far." Colin. "Dad, I want to help." "I do." He said it like a line he'd rehearsed. "But tonight isn't. I have this call, and a breakfast meeting at 7, and I can't." He stopped. Started again. Straighter this time. "You should have planned better. You know that, right? You were always the one who said, protect the downside." He walked me back to the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. The doors closed between us. I sat on a bench along the river for a while, watching the city lights on the water. $250. 2 sons who had looked at me and seen a problem to root around. I had 1 son left. I took a bus south from Chicago to Nashville, then another to Chattanooga, and by late afternoon on the 3rd day, I was walking down a 2-lane county road outside Dalton, Georgia, with a paper bag from a gas station and an address I'd kept in my study desk since last Christmas. Jude's house was pale yellow with white trim, old paint but clean. There was a vegetable garden along the side fence, brown and stubbled with late fall stalks, a metal mailbox at the end of a cracked concrete walk. A wind chime on the porch made a small sound in the November air. I knocked. The door opened before I'd taken my hand away from it. "Wren." She had flour on her apron and a dish towel over one shoulder, and she looked at me, this dirty, unshaven old man in a cracked jacket, and her face did something I hadn't seen in 3 days. It opened. "Oh, honey," she said, and she stepped forward and put her hand on my arm. "Come inside, come on now. You're cold, come inside right this minute." She didn't ask my name. She didn't ask what happened. She guided me over the threshold like she'd been expecting someone who needed exactly this. Inside, it was warm. Something was on the stove, soup or stew. The living room had a worn couch and a bookshelf and a framed photograph of Jude and Wren at what looked like a hiking trail somewhere in the mountains, both of them squinting into the sun and grinning like they'd just discovered something. "Jude," she called toward the back of the house. "Jude, come out here. Your daddy's here." His footsteps came fast. He appeared in the hallway in his shop clothes, still in the work boots, a smear of grease on his forearm. And when he saw me, the first thing he did was come straight across the room. "Dad." He put both hands on my shoulders. He looked me over carefully, not calculating, not assessing for inconvenience, just looking the way you look at someone you love when you need to check that they're all right. "Did somebody hurt you?" "No," I said. "I've just had a hard few days." "You're staying with us," Wren said from the kitchen doorway. Not a question, a statement of fact. "I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing," Jude said in a voice that closed the subject. "That's our room you'll be in tonight. Don't try to talk us out of it." I tried anyway. They ignored me with the comfortable efficiency of two people who have already made up their minds. Wren made biscuits from scratch and a pot of chicken stew that had been going since that afternoon. She set a bowl in front of me without ceremony, pulled up a chair across the table, and sat down with her own bowl, and the three of us ate together. It tasted, I don't have a more precise word for this, it tasted like being loved. After dinner, Jude did the dishes while Wren and I sat at the table. She asked gentle questions. Nothing sharp. Were my feet warm enough? Did I need an extra blanket? Was there anyone she should call for me? When I said there wasn't, she nodded and got up and brought me a second cup of coffee without my asking. Jude put me in their bedroom before 9 o'clock. Clean sheets, a quilt May would have approved of. The kind of room that tells you exactly who the people are who sleep in it. I lay in the dark and listened to the house. After a while, I heard them in the kitchen, speaking quietly. I wasn't trying to listen. The house was just that small, and the night was just that still. "Jude," Wren said, her voice low and careful, "I've been thinking about the truck." A pause. "I know," he said. "If he needs real help, not just one night, we're going to need money we don't have right now." A breath. "The truck's worth 11, maybe 12,000 if you find the right buyer." Silence stretched out between them. "Jude," she said softer now, "we're also going to need money in a few months, for the baby." I stopped breathing. "I know," he said. "I'm not saying don't help him. Quickly, I would never say that. I'm saying both things are true at the same time. We need that truck. Your father needs help. And I think," a long pause, "I think we sell the truck." Another silence. "Yeah," Jude said finally. The word came out quiet and certain, the way people say things they've already accepted even before they say them out loud. "Yeah, we sell the truck." "We'll figure the rest out," Wren said. "We always do." "You're going to be a wonderful mother," Jude said. I covered my mouth with my hand and wept silently into their pillow, not from grief. From the shock of witnessing something I had spent 64 years failing to recognize, that the wealthiest man I knew was sleeping on his own couch so I could have his bed, and was planning to sell the single tool his livelihood depended on, and doing it without hesitation and without resentment, because that is simply what love does when it is real and it has nowhere to hide. In the morning, Wren made coffee. She set it in front of me without asking how I took it. She'd remembered from dinner. 2 sugars, no cream. She sat across the table and folded her hands and looked at me with an expression that was steady and clear, and carried something careful in it. "Can I say something?" "Of course." "I noticed things since you came in," she said. "The way you carry yourself, the way you speak. Small things that don't quite add up." She paused. "I don't know exactly what this is, but I know you came to our door and needed something, and whatever that something is, we're giving it to you. Not because of what you might have, because you're Jude's father, and because that's what you do for family." She held my gaze. "Whatever you came here to learn," she said quietly, "I want you to know we're not doing it to pass anything. We're doing it because it's right." I couldn't speak for a moment. "You're going to be a wonderful mother," I said finally. She smiled, a small, private smile. "I know," she said. I went to the back porch and called Baxter. "Tomorrow morning," I said, "bring the full packet, bring witnesses, and call my other 2 boys. Tell them their father needs them in Dalton, Georgia. Don't tell them anything else." He was quiet for a moment. "Are you ready for this?" "No," I said. "Do it anyway." They arrived the next morning in separate rental cars. Adrian in a silver Mercedes. Colin from the Chattanooga airport in a rideshare. They both stopped on the sidewalk when they saw Baxter's black Suburban parked in front of the house. They looked at each other, then at the house, then slowly at me, standing on Jude's front porch, clean and shaved, wearing a flannel shirt Jude had lent me. I watched them understand. The confusion first, then the calculation, Baxter, the legal briefcase, the 2 witnesses standing by the door, and then something they couldn't quite conceal, something that looked almost like dread. We sat around Jude's kitchen table. Wren stood by the sink, arms folded gently, saying nothing. Baxter opened the folder. "Hartwell Construction sold to Mercer Capital Partners 38 months ago," he said. "Net proceeds to Silas Hartwell, $47,200,000 held in trust. No lawsuits, no losses, no bankruptcy." He placed a document in the center of the table. "The estate is intact." The room went very quiet. Adrian's jaw tightened. So this was a test. "A question," I said, "that I needed answered." "You lied to us," Colin said. "You didn't ask enough questions to catch the lie," I said. "You asked for a shelter address and gave me cab fare." He looked away. "I came to your doors with nothing," I said, "or what looked like nothing, and both of you made a calculation. You weighed the inconvenience against what I might cost you, and you decided the number was manageable." I paused. "Your brother made a different calculation. He and his wife decided to sell the truck he needs to keep his business running so I'd have enough money to survive." Adrian started to speak. "I'm not finished," I said quietly. "I am not finished." I looked at Jude, who had been sitting with his hands around his coffee mug, saying nothing, his face unreadable. "Jude," I said, "I owe you something I should have said years ago. I spent a long time looking at the life you built and privately thinking you'd chosen small. I was wrong about that. You chose exactly right." I looked at Wren. "Both of you did." Wren wiped her eyes. Jude said nothing. His hand moved across the table and covered hers. Baxter distributed the documents. The estate would be divided with conditions. Jude and Wren would receive $22 million in a family trust, structured to protect them and their child, a grandchild I had just learned existed. From financial pressure for the rest of their lives, the house they were renting would be purchased outright in their names. A new truck, fully equipped, would be waiting at a dealership in Dalton before the end of the week. Adrian and Colin would each receive $8 million, disbursed across 5 years. Before the first payment, each would complete 6 months of bi-weekly family counseling, 100 hours of volunteer service at a homeless shelter of their choosing, and 1 honest conversation with their brother, not about money, not about the estate, just the 2 of them talking like men who share a father. "If either of you refuses any condition," I said, "your portion goes to Jude's family, permanently, non-negotiable." Adrian's hands were flat on the table. "We'll comply," he said. "Not sorry, just compliance." I looked at him for a long moment. "I know," I said. "For now, compliance is enough. The rest takes time." After Baxter left, after Adrian and Colin drove away toward the highway, Jude and Wren and I sat at the kitchen table for a while longer. The coffee had gone cold. Nobody moved to reheat it. "I'm going to be a grandfather," I said. Wren laughed, a short, surprised sound. "Yeah," she said, "you are." "I'd like to be around for that," I said, "if that's all right." Jude looked at me across the table. "Dad," he said, "you never had to ask." Before I left Dalton that first week, I called Baxter about something else, something that had been sitting with me since the bus terminal. Wes, I gave Baxter the general location, the VFW cap, the name. Told him to find the man and get him whatever he needed, stable housing, employment connections, medical, whatever the situation called for. Baxter asked no questions. That's what 22 years of working together earns you. I don't know if we found him. I hope we did. 2 years later, I drive down from Marietta every third weekend. I sleep in the guest room they added when the baby came. My granddaughter's name is May. They chose it themselves and didn't tell me until she was born. When I walked into that hospital room and Jude said, "Dad, meet May," I had to sit down in the chair by the window and collect myself for a minute before I could trust my own voice. She's almost 18 months old. She has Ren's dark eyes and Jude's stubborn jaw, and when she sees my truck pull into their carport, she makes a noise like a small, determined engine and charges toward the door. Adrian called me in March of this year. Not about money. He'd finished his volunteer hours at the Atlanta Mission and wanted to tell me about a veteran he'd met there, a man who'd lost his business, lost his house, spent nearly 2 years sleeping in his car. They'd had a long conversation. Adrian wanted to know if I could help connect him with some employment resources through old contacts in the construction industry. "Yeah," I said. "I think I can do that." We talked for 40 minutes. He asked about Jude. He asked about the baby. He didn't ask about money. That's not the ending I planned for. But I've learned at 64 that the endings you don't plan for are usually the ones worth living through. May said a new word last weekend, clear as anything, pointing at me from across the kitchen, while Ren laughed and Jude reached for his phone. "Pop, pop," she said. "I have spent my whole adult life building things. Buildings, contracts, balance sheets, the particular architecture of a successful man's reputation. None of it prepared me for that word. None of it came close. There are 47 million reasons I could give you for why I did what I did. The real one is much simpler. I needed to know who my sons were when the money wasn't in the room. What I found was this: one of them already knew who he was. He'd known for years. He just never needed me to confirm it. Money is very good at measuring some things. It is completely useless at measuring the ones that matter. That is the only thing I am entirely certain of on any given morning when I drive south on I-75 toward a small yellow house on a dead-end road in Dalton, Georgia, where a little girl who carries her grandmother's name is already waiting by the window to see my headlights come around the corner.